Some houses are resonance boxes. You walk in thinking you're alone. You walk out knowing you were heard. My name is Alana Reed. I'm 34, a real estate agent out of Naperville, Illinois, and I used to love showing empty houses at night. Less traffic, less noise. The rooms felt bigger, and you could hear the client fall in love with the echo of their own footsteps. This was a Thursday in October 2018, 7:40 p.m. Drizzle just starting to slick the sidewalks. I'd staged a corner lot on Fairview. Fresh lemon cleaner, warm lamps set to evening, a playlist whispering piano through a Bluetooth speaker in the kitchen. A cash buyer had insisted on an after-hours showing, urgent, ready to close, and I needed one more deal to hit my month. Normal is my comfort zone. I lock the front, kick off wet leaves, do the opening patter. East-facing windows bring in morning light. The floor plan is open without feeling cold. My hand straightens a picture frame of a fake beach, and I move on. The thermostat, a smart little disc on the hallway wall, blinks 66 and resets to a dim dot like it forgot its name. I chalk it up to a power hiccup. The playlist stutters for half a second, then continues. I'm good at reading houses. I know when drywall has secrets, when plumbing is sulking. This one felt eager. That's the word that occurred to me. I do my loop, living room to kitchen to dining to stair, and when I pass the beach picture again, it's crooked the other way. That happens. Air vents, door closing, someone bumped it earlier. I fix it without thinking. From upstairs, I hear a crisp single beep like a lockbox chirp. There isn't a lockbox upstairs. The only one is hanging from the railing on the front steps outside, swinging in the damp air I just came through. I stand at the bottom of the staircase, hand on the banister, and tell myself the tone could have been the fridge. It isn't the fridge. The text from my buyer pings, I'm outside. I peek through the sidelight. Empty sidewalk, empty curb, just wet pavement reflecting a yellow street lamp. No rush, I text back, trying to keep my hands from feeling like I'd dipped them into a bowl of coins. I do the kitchen again. The compass app on my phone, don't ask why I opened it, instinct, spins lazily and then pegs west at the sink, like the house is someplace else entirely. When I glance at my listing photos to confirm a paint color, there's a round wall clock over the dining room doorway in the image that doesn't exist on the actual wall. Seconds hand pointing between 7 and 8, like it's nervous. I don't remember a clock. I don't forget props. The HVAC hums like a held breath, and then I swear to you the vents whisper my own cadence back at me. East-facing windows. Syllables scraped low and gritty, like my script had been run through gravel. I step back. The plastic carpet protector in the living room shows faint smudges. Small, like sock feet, moving toward the staircase and then hesitating, toes in place. I tell myself I'm reading shine and shadows. The lemon cleaner smell sharpens, almost electrical, like it's being reheated from inside the walls. I should have waited for the buyer. I should have left. Instead, I told myself I was in control of the space, like always, and moved to the basement door, the one question mark in this house. As I clicked the light, the fluorescent tube stammered and then held steady, a cold note. I started down. Halfway, the air turned warm, like a dryer had been left open below, but when I breathed out, a pale cloud hung in front of me, as if I'd stepped into two different rooms at once. On the concrete, I could hear the sump pump humming, steady, patient, despite the fact that it was unplugged. I'd unplugged it earlier so the cord wouldn't be a tripping hazard. I can show you the photo I took for my own notes, the plug lying like a sleeping snake. At the top of the stairs, the door eased itself toward the jamb, inch by inch, like it didn't want to startle me. That somehow made it worse than a slam. I turned to go back up and stopped on the last step. A key lay on the tread, brass, wet, as if rinsed and not dried. The lockbox key, or an identical twin, I hadn't removed it. I'd used the keypad code on the handle. I don't know how long I stood there doing nothing but listening to the faint, weirdly tired whine of an electric motor with no current. "You can show the basement." It came from directly behind me, a fraction to my left, timbre exactly my own but pitched lower, like a recording played at the wrong speed. The voice had distance inside it, an odd roominess, as if it had been spoken in the kitchen and routed through the ducts to the stairwell, skimming the lemon and metal with its breath. I went up those steps without touching the rail. The door closed softly on its own behind me. I opened it again. The light still burned below. Every lamp upstairs was glowing a little too bright. My phone buzzed. Another text from buyer. "Sorry got delayed. 10 minutes. I didn't reply. I didn't lock up. I walked out into the wet night with my throat tasting like a battery and stood by my car, waiting for my breath to match the dark. I told myself a dozen plausible things on the drive home. Bad staging company messing with the thermostat, Bluetooth speaker picking up a neighbor's device. Maybe one of the other agents copied our photo set wrong. You can live on plausible for a long time if you sell spaces. The voicemail on my phone the next morning was 22 minutes long, time-stamped 8:03 p.m. to 8:25 p.m., which covers the span after I fled. I hit play once, twice, and I won't play it again. My voice, walking a stranger through rooms I wasn't in. Here's the dining room, gorgeous molding, east-facing windows bring in morning light, and then a whisper layered beneath it, operating like a shadow under ice, correcting my directions, shifting my phrasing. At the 17-minute mark, there's a damp sound, like a key being lifted from water, and I say cheerfully, "You can show the basement." I don't work after hours anymore. That cost me a bonus and a handful of clients, and I don't care. I still sell houses. I still straighten frames. But when I hear that tiny, patient whine of an appliance at rest, something in me backs away. I used to think vacant meant harmless. Now I know better. I sell empty houses for a living, and that night one tried to sell me back to myself. My name is Miguel Aranda. I'm 41, a traveling MRI tech who spends more time in rental kitchens than my own. And I used to swear by rural Airbnbs because silence helps me sleep between hospital shifts. This was January 2021 outside Taos, New Mexico. Sky scrubbed clean, temperature falling hard enough to ring your ears. The casita was adobe, low and rounded, with a kiva fireplace and a little Nico carved in the wall with a clay saint tucked inside. Check-in was via code. The host had left a folded wool blanket by the door and a bottle of water on the counter with a handwritten note that said, "Welcome." I could smell piñon smoke hours away, like it had settled into the pores of the place. The manual sat by the stove in a plastic sleeve. The page with "Quiet Hours" was faintly warm, as if it had just spit itself out of a printer. I laughed at myself for noticing. The gas heater clicked on with that tidy mouse footfall of a sound, and I felt it take the room's pulse. I could have sworn the on-off rhythm matched my heart for the first 5 minutes, a private sync. I pulled my boots, texted my scheduler, set an alarm for 5:30 a.m., and went to brush my teeth. The mirror above the sink was old glass that flexed your face. I fogged it with a long breath and watched it clear, satisfied at the nothing of it. That should have been the end of interesting. In the main room, something tinkled, delicate. A sound I know from porches, wind chimes, but the windows were shut and there were no chimes anywhere inside. The heater cut, clicked back on. The rhythm now felt a beat slower than my chest, like it was listening for me and adjusting. From the round duct of the swamp cooler near the ceiling, a thread of Spanish drifted down. "No le abras. No la abras. Don't open it." The manual, which I'd read like scripture, said the cooler was sealed for winter. I stood on a chair, put my hand on the grill, and felt the duct breathe. Not air, exactly. A very slow inhale. I went back to my phone and turned the alarm off. Something about the house's timing bothered me, the way trains will if you've been at a station too long. I checked the alarm again, set for 5:30 a.m. The heater clicked. A chime sounded from somewhere intimate, not in the air but in the clay. I told myself to eat. I warmed a tortilla on the stove and tasted dust, the mineral taste of adobe, the way a wall holds history and lets it out in small drafts. The saint in the Nico, a woman, cloak painted with a worn blue, faced the room with that mild half-smile saints have when you're not looking at them directly. I said, "Evening," to her because I was alone and too tired to feel ridiculous. I wake easily. That night I dropped hard. I woke at 3:13 a.m. to my phone's alarm sawing a bright tone in the dark, the same tone I'd used for 5:30. I slapped it off. The heater was on. I watched the red ember of the pilot through its little window blink, blink, blink like an eye irritated by smoke. I hadn't set an alarm for 3:13. When I stood, the room smelled like cool rock and wood ash. In the bathroom, the mirror was fogged from edge to edge as if someone had stepped from a hot shower seconds earlier. The towels were cool and dry. I wiped a circle. My face appeared. Everything ordinary in sight. The door behind me, the little shelf, the corner of the Nico in the other room. I widened the clear patch with the heel of my hand. The Nico in the reflection was empty, no saint. Just the gray scoop of adobe, soft-edged, like a mouth left open too long. I heard, faintly, a hymn. My mother used to sing at the kitchen sink when I was a kid, slow and gentle, never all the way on pitch. This version was tight, however, and measured, paced by the heater's click and flare. The sound turned the back of my throat into paper. I walked to the main room. The saint in real life had turned to face the wall, her painted cloak almost touching it, like she wanted to be very close to something I couldn't see. I know how to stage panic and how to throttle it. Hospitals teach you the difference between noise and alarm. I put my back to the front door and packed my bag, charger, toothbrush, socks. The zipper hesitated 3 inches from closed and then ran itself shut with the small confidence of a person taking your hand to cross a street. "Okay," I said to nobody. My phone screen lit, 3:13. I put my hand on the cool curve of the adobe wall. It felt like it was breathing shallowly, like a sleeping pet with a cold. By the time the sky went pale, I had talked myself into a polite private review to the host. Quiet note about the heater and the alarm, an odd acoustics in the duct, the suggestion of wind somewhere internal. I typed and untyped and closed the app without sending. I loaded my bag into the car and sat with my hands on the wheel until the breath I saw came from me again and not from some invisible seam. An hour down the highway, the host messaged, "I'm so sorry for what you experienced with her last night." There was a photo attached, taken from the casita's doorway, the niche dead center, a photo that the metadata said was years ago, and the timestamp at the bottom read 3:13 a.m. The niche was empty in that photo. A line of smoke, faint as a drawn pencil, curled into it. I typed, deleted, typed again. "Who is her?" I didn't hit send. The heater's rhythm had lodged in my head, matching nothing now, refusing to line up with my pulse. There's a kind of silence out there that isn't empty. It listens, patiently, as if waiting for you to drift a little toward it before it moves. And once you've noticed it, you start to hear it in your own house, in your own ducts, in the way your phone screen grays a fraction when you say a certain name aloud. I tell myself I just needed sleep. I tell myself the saint never turned. And then, sometimes around 3 in the morning, I smell piñón that isn't there and realize the silence in my room is paying attention to the wrong thing. Some memories don't weaken with time. They sharpen until they feel like a blade you keep accidentally finding in your pocket. If I hadn't lived this one, I'd roll my eyes at anyone telling it. My name is Tara Ung. I'm 27 in this memory, a grad student in architecture obsessed with staircases, the way they hold a body, the way they ask you to commit. It was late summer 2015, in a hunk of Victorian rot on the west side of Detroit. My friend Kelsey waited in the car with the doors locked and her shoes on the dash, engine off, sun slanting low through a sky the color of white paper that got left in the rain. I told her I just needed 30 minutes to photograph a walnut spiral for a study on handrail ergonomics. The house had that smell old places get when they've been empty too long. Gypsum and mouse scatter and a sweetness like fruit that fell behind a cabinet years ago and turned to perfume. Heat makes wood complain. Every board had a reason to pop. Dust made visible columns in the light. I stepped carefully. I set my bag on the front hall's tile, shot a few establishing frames, newel post gnawed by time, the first 6 risers clowning themselves into sag. My own voice sounded too round in there. "Escadas contam a etica de uma casa," I said out loud by habit, then corrected myself in English because I write in English. Stairs tell you a house's ethics, how it handles friction. That's the kind of nonsense we say in school to feel like we're learning a secret. I tugged my sleeves up and put my hand on the rail to test the comfort of the curve. It came away tacky, not glue. Resin? Something that felt like sap that had been coaxed out of wood by heat and then cooled without committing to a state. I rubbed my fingers together and smelled summer trees, sticky and clean. An insect droned somewhere deep in the wall. I listened again. Not an insect, a metronome. Soft, precise, mechanical, from the parlor beyond the hall. A Victorian house might have had a piano, sure, but whatever used to mark time in this place had been gone for decades. The tick was perfect. I moved toward it, and it moved away without getting louder or fainter, like an old habit you can't place. At the foot of the stairs, dust had been kicked aside by recent shoes, maybe city workers or other hunters like me, but smaller prints dotted the soft gray at the center of each tread, bare, the size of a child's socked foot. The toes pointed up toward the landing and then seemed to stop and hover and blur, like the child had stood still long enough for time to smear him into a shape rather than a person. I told myself a raccoon could do this if it had a foot fetish. I stepped over the prints. The whole house was hot except the landing, where a brief rope of cold air seemed to run from the vertical slit of a window to the wall. I stood there until my skin pebble-raised. When I pressed my fingertips to the ribbed iron of an old radiator, a single piano note, middle C if I had to guess, rang inside its throat so faint I thought it was inside my head. I laughed out of reflex. The laugh didn't bounce anywhere. Nothing in that house was interested enough to throw it back. On the landing, an envelope jammed behind the baseboard had given up under the heat and spit itself back out. I bent carefully and pried it free. 3 Polaroids inside, all bleached to a hospital kind of white, except for the same scene in each. A family posed at the base of this staircase, the father's mouth a firm line, the mother's smile tired and brave, a teenage girl trying not to look like she cared, and a small boy who never came out right. In each photo, his head was present, his shoulders, and then his lower half blurred, as if he were the breath you take before committing to a step. A thin black band like a bruise circled the father's right wrist in one of the shots. In another, a vase on the hall table reflected a smudge that might have been someone standing on the landing where I was. I slid the Polaroids back, telling myself I'd leave them somewhere safe on my way out. I still had angles to capture. The camera around my neck was off. I'm sure of that because I use an old manual, and you feel it when you turn it alive. And yet the shutter clacked, that satisfying little guillotine noise that sounds like confidence. I froze. The metronome beat ticked once, twice, and then stopped like a throat clearing. My phone vibrated. A text from Kelsey. Stop waving from the landing. 2 heartbeats later. Not funny. I hadn't waved. I texted back a photo of my shoes in the dust like proof of life, and then forced myself to finish what I came for, because walking out at that moment would have meant I'd never be able to go into abandoned places again, and that part of me felt like it would die. I framed the run from the landing up to the second floor, pivoted, shot the curve, tested the rail again, the tackiness now thinly black, like soot rising through sap. The house exhaled. From the ceiling, a loose square of lathe whispered a soft wood-on-wood sound. Light slid as the sun slipped toward the horizon and found a window-paned gap in the boards. And then the shadows made their decision. My body throws two shadows in light like that, a primary and a faint second. I know this because I'm a photographer and because I like to watch. The wall ahead of me bloomed two distinct silhouettes that didn't match my position. One was mine, shoulders narrow, hair in a knot. The other stood a step below. It was taller than me by a head, its shoulders square, a wide hand hovering near the rail but not on it. I told myself to move. Before I could, a voice like thin paper rubbed between two fingers spoke from beside my left ear, old and kind and irritated at once. "Keep your hand on the rail." I did what I was told. When my palm slid along the wood, the soot came up in a solid smear, black and deep, and brought with it the impossible smell of lilacs, the exact smell of my grandmother's lotion, which I hadn't smelled in 10 years. For a second, I was in two houses, this one and a Chicago bungalow from my childhood, and they were the same place, and the stairs were the same set of instructions delivered decades apart. "Keep your hand on the rail," the voice said again, not unkind, as if the compliment for surviving required obedience. I went down. Kelsey met me halfway with a flashlight, breathless, furious the way people get when they're scared for you and ashamed about their own fear. "You waved from the landing," she said, "twice, and then you didn't answer." I held up my hands. The right one was streaked black, the palm covered as if I'd held charcoal. "There's no fireplace," I said, because I needed to say something that could be fact-checked. We got in the car. We didn't speak until we were at the corner. That night, I uploaded the photos. In the best frame, the handrail is a fraction of a degree off from where it should be, subtle, like it had inhaled. In the next frame, it has settled. In 3, if you flick between them, the rail seems to skip, then return, and my camera, which was off, registers a timestamp in a different font than the others. In one of the Polaroids I thought I'd put back, now somehow in my bag, the father's hand on the newel is darker than skin should be, as if he had dipped it in something first. I slept badly and dreamed of stairs with no handrails at all. When the fall semester began, my sketches changed. All the sequences I drew had airy runs and clean modern lines and nothing for a palm to find. It took my professor to point it out in crit. "You've designed a series of decisions with nowhere to hold on," he said, half admiring, half concerned. I didn't know how to tell him that felt like the only honest way to ascend anything anymore. I go out to old places less now, and when I do, I keep my hand flat against my thigh when I climb, because I don't know which of us the rail is prepared to guide. Some nights at work, the hours stack neatly like plates, others slip. Some rooms learn you back. I'm Ruth Ellison. I was 52 in October of 2009, a hospice nurse out of Beckley, West Virginia. It had rained hard all evening, one of those Appalachian downpours that turn gravel driveways to slick creeks and make the porch swing argue with the chain until it decides whether to rest or complain. The call came a little after midnight. The Avery family on a farm road, the father expected to pass overnight. My job in those hours is simple and holy. Be calm, tell the truth, keep the temperature human. It's paperwork and comfort, and making sure the door between this life and whatever comes next opens without slamming. The kitchen smelled like coffee that had thought about brewing and gave up. A big wall clock sat stubborn in an unsure tick. The daughter flicked her eyes to me and back to the table with every sound the house made. We spoke in the quiet voice families use when they've spent the day being brave. In the patient's bedroom, a nightlight plush to the wall cast a thin amber half-moon on the baseboard. It wasn't plugged in. The storm had taken their power hours before. They had a generator for the fridge and a few lamps, but this one glowed by will alone. "It does that sometimes," the daughter whispered, and then seemed to wish she hadn't said the sentence. Mr. Avery lay with his mouth open in the way of dying men whose bodies have finished with appetite and argument. His forehead was cool. His pulse was a bird flutter, then less. I've watched a lot of people leave. He was leaving. Wintergreen, ointment for sore backs and old knees, moved through the room like breath. Somewhere in the corridor, a floorboard hummed a complaint, and the air went thicker, not warmer or colder, but the consistency you feel before a storm speaks again. I walked back to the kitchen to ask for his birth date and the spelling of a middle name, and when I returned, the space by the door felt like walking into a screen you couldn't see. The family had rigged a baby monitor months earlier when Mr. Avery lost his voice and his bell. The receiver sat on the dresser, a big plastic thing from the late 90s with an antenna you could pretend was a joke. It hissed the way old machines do when they're more invested in existing than performing, and then a man's voice filtered through, pitched low, slow, unfamiliar. The words were chewed by static in a way I can't quote without filling them in, but the tone carried the shape of "close it" or "don't let it in," steady, without fear, like instructions you give to someone you know will listen. The daughter looked at me. "Daddy?" she said softly, the kind of test only a child can offer. The voice didn't answer. The nightlight glowed. The air tried to be a room. I checked the baseboard heat. The storm had cut their lines. No air should have been moving through those vents. Still, a hymn pressed itself into the room as if the duct were a throat and the house had something on its mind. "Nearer, my God, to thee," or something near enough that my childhood knew it, the breath shaping the words more than the lips. It's a cruel thing, what memory does to sound. It paints whether you want it to or not. On the window pane, fog traced itself in 5 straight lines, one above the other, a neat little staff the exact height of the nightlight's glow. I rubbed at it and felt warmth from the glass that didn't belong to the night. The clock on the wall in the kitchen hiccuped itself into stillness when I stepped out to phone the on-call doctor. The digital microwave readout bled to 217 and held there the whole time I stood there with the receiver to my ear and the quiet switched on high. My pager lit and vibrated with a call number that didn't register when I returned it. My cell faded to blank for a blink every time I said Mr. Avery's name. In the bedroom, the work turned into ceremony. I listened for the last exhale. I held his hand and told him he could go. He did. We let the moment be. Grief isn't an event. It's a weather pattern. I filled in what I could on the certificate on my clipboard. Time of death. The line waited. The daughter's phone said 217. The kitchen clock insisted on 217. The microwave had doubled down. I wrote 217 and my pen left 2 lines instead of 1, a dark, confident strip of ink and a ghost of the same line just to the right, as if my hand had a twin that lagged half a heartbeat behind. It didn't stop when I tried a new pen. It didn't stop when I printed my name. When I paused, the room released a soft joint popping noise, a house's knee unkinking after prayer, and the paper warmed under my palm like skin. We set the forms aside. The nightlight went out and then on again, a faint pulse that made the baseboard shadow look like it was breathing. From the kitchen, the porch screen door tapped against its jamb, one precise tap, and then the wind lifted the smell of wet earth up the stairs. The daughter asked me to sit with her mother for a minute, and so I did. And for that minute, The hymn threaded the air like a needle that didn't want to be seen doing its work. The monitor stayed quiet. The line on the window pane feathered and ran and stayed 5. By the time the funeral home's men arrived, the house had made its choices. The clocks were still faithful to 2:17. The microwave pretended it had never learned any other numbers. The girl hugged me in the kitchen, and I left the porch door the way I found it, almost closed, because I am a nurse and a person, and both of those roles understand the courtesy of liminal spaces. The swing gave one reluctant creak, as if it had been instructed to count. 2 days later, I got a voicemail from the Avery landline. The timestamp read 2:17 a.m. The message ran 15 seconds. It is 3 breaths in a house that could be theirs or could be anyone's after rain. On the 8th second, a woman, me, I would swear it, except I know how silly that sounds, says in a careful, patient voice I recognize from work, "Do not leave the door open." The call history shows no incoming call at that time, no number to return. I played it twice, and then I kept it. It lives on my phone like a note I wrote to myself and forgot how to read. Since then, when the shift runs late and the storm warnings push against the evening and somebody's kitchen clock stalls out for no good reason at a number that happens to be 2:17, I feel the whole room lean. I write my lines slowly, aware of my second hand. I close the doors when I can, and when I can't, I sit very still, listening to the way silence grows heavier than any noise, and I tell myself it's just weather, even though I know that on certain nights, the house and I are the weather together.